Today is April 5th. Welcome to Big Book Daily. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic. It's a thrill, honor, and joy to be here with you today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Today out of the Big Book, we're going to be reading the Personal Stories Section 2 or Part 2. They Stopped in Time. That's the first story of Part 2, and this is called The Missing Link. So today we're going to be reading pages 282 through 283. And out of the 12 and 12, we're going to be reading a little bit more of our journey through step 11, page 104. So with all that, my friends, hope you're doing well this morning. Life is good over here. Can't complain one bit. Glad to have another set of 24 hours. So let's go ahead and get to the good stuff. So if you recall from yesterday's reading in the Big Book, we're at the second part of our personal stories entitled They Stopped in Time. And there are several stories just within this section here. It says here in the last paragraph, therefore these 17 AAs and hundreds of thousands like them have been saved years of infinite suffering. They sum it up with something like this. We didn't wait to hit bottom because, thank God, we could see the bottom. Actually, the bottom came up and hit us. That sold us on Alcoholics Anonymous. And yesterday we began our first story within this section. This poor individual in the missing link, he has felt different and apart pretty much since his earliest memories. It says right here, very first sentence, when I was 8 or 9 years old, life suddenly became very difficult. Feelings began to emerge that I didn't understand. Depression crept into my life as I started to feel alone, even in crowded rooms. So we see here that this person right here feels different from everybody else from as early as they can remember. He's getting in trouble at school. He's worrying his parents. So we're going to build on this idea by reading 282 and 283 today. Top of page 282. About that time, I started seeing therapists and specialists, each with a different theory and a different solution. They conducted special tests and interviews designed to get to the root of my troubles, and came to the conclusion that I had a learning disability and was depressed. The psychiatrist started me on some medication, and the problems in school started to clear up. Even some of the depression began to ease up for a bit. However, something still seemed fundamentally wrong. Whatever the problem, I soon found what appeared to be the solution to everything. At age 15, I traveled with my family to Israel. My brother was to be bar mitzvahed atop Masada. There was no legal drinking age, so I found it quite easy to walk into a bar and order a drink. New Year's Eve fell in the middle of the trip, and since the Jewish calendar celebrates a different New Year than the Gregorian calendar, the only celebration was being held in the American sector of a university. I got drunk for the first time that night, and it changed everything. A stop at a local bar began the evening. I ordered a beer from the waitress, and as I took the first sip, something was immediately different. I looked around me, at the people drinking and dancing, smiling and laughing, all of whom were much older than I. Suddenly, I somehow felt that I belonged. From there, I made my way to the university where I found hundreds of other Americans celebrating New Year's Eve. Before the night was over, I had started a fight with a number of college-age drunken fellows and returned to the hotel stinking drunk and riddled with bruises. Ah, yes, what a grand evening it was. I fell in love that night with a beverage. Returning to the States, I was determined to continue with my newfound love affair. I found myself trying to convince my friends to join me, but I was met with resistance. Still determined, I set out to find new friends who could help me maintain this fantastic solution to my most desperate problems. My escapade started as a weekend pursuit and progressed into daily obsession. At first, it took several beers to get me drunk to my satisfaction. However, within 3 years, it took a fifth and a half of vodka, a bottle of wine, and several beers in an evening's time to satisfactorily black me out. I would obtain alcohol by any means necessary. That meant lying, stealing, and cheating. My motto was, if you felt like I did, you'd have to get drunk too. As the feelings of hopelessness and depression progressed, so did my drinking. Thoughts of suicide came more and more frequently. It felt as if things were never going to change. Progress with my therapist came to almost a complete halt. The hopelessness that was compounded by the fact that the one thing that was bringing me relief, the one thing I counted on to take the pain away, was ultimately destroying me. The end, I feared, was close. My last semester in high school marked my bottom. It was everyday drinking then. Since I had already been accepted at college, I consciously decided to make the last semester one big party. But it was no fun at all. I was miserable. I graduated narrowly and took a job at a local garage. It was difficult to manage my drinking and a job since they were both full-time, but I concocted all kinds of lies to ensure that nothing would interfere with my drinking. Okay, that's all the reading we're going to do today. I definitely want to come back to this in just a minute. Alright guys, so as you recall, we've been journeying through step 11 in the 12 and 12, which is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And in the first half of this section, we've been talking about meditation and the different ways we can go about that. And yesterday we talked about prayer in specific and how we should always kind of add that, thy will be done. And we're going to build on that idea on page 104. He may have forgotten the possibility that his own wishful thinking and the human tendency to rationalize have distorted his so-called guidance. With the best of intentions, he tends to force his own will into all sorts of situations and problems with the comfortable assurance that he's acting under God's specific direction. Under such an illusion, he can, of course, create great havoc without in the least intending it. We also fall into another similar temptation. We form ideas as to what we think God's will is for other people. We say to ourselves, this one ought to be cured of his fatal malady, or that one ought to be relieved of his emotional pain. And we pray for these specific things. Such prayers, of course, are fundamentally good acts, but often they are based upon a supposition that we know God's will for the person for whom we pray. This means that side by side with an earnest prayer, there can be a certain amount of presumption and conceit in us. It is AA's experience that particularly in these cases, we ought to pray that God's will, whatever it is, be done for others as well as for ourselves. In AA, we have found that the actual good results of prayer are beyond question. They are matters of knowledge and experience. All those who have persisted have found strength not ordinarily their own. They have found wisdom beyond their usual capability, and they have increasingly found a peace of mind which can stand firm in the face of difficult circumstances. We discover that we do receive guidance for our lives to just about the extent that we stop making demands upon God to give it to us on order and on our terms. Almost any experienced AA will tell how his affairs have taken remarkable and unexpected turns for the better as he tried to improve his contact with God. He will also report that out of every season of grief or suffering, when the hand of God seemed heavy or even unjust, new lessons for living were learned, new resources of courage were uncovered, and that finally, inescapably, conviction came that God does move in a mysterious way his wonders to perform. Alright, so while this is fresh real quick, I think this is really fascinating stuff that, again, I think the 12 and 12 saying here, pray for God's will in their life, whatever it may be. I often forget that, sometimes I still want to play God and I want my will to be done in not just my life, but in theirs as well, even with the best intentions. For me, I'm sure people prayed for me when I was drinking. But I needed to experience some pain before I finally admitted to myself that I'm an alcoholic. I think that, praying for God's will is certainly a good idea. And going back to the big book real fast, we see that our friend here, his life is becoming unmanageable. I mean, he is suicidal. He's drinking almost every day. And he drank very, very early in his life. He's drinking almost every day and trying to find friends that feel the same way he does about the drink. He graduates from high school. He does get into college, or he's accepted into college, but he also accepts a full-time job in addition to his full-time drinking. There's a lot that he's trying to manage here, and it's going to be very, very soon before his life becomes unmanageable. But it all stems from something being missing in his life. You can see it from the very first paragraph that something is not quite right. Right now, he's turning to the alcohol, but as we can see, within 3 years, not just a year, and you can see how his alcohol has, the volume of his alcohol has increased exponentially in just 3 years' time. It says right here on 283, at first, it took several beers to get me drunk to my satisfaction. However, within 3 years, it took a fifth and a half of vodka, a bottle of wine, and several beers in an evening's time to satisfactorily black me out. I would attain alcohol by any means necessary. That meant lying, stealing, and cheating. My motto was, if you felt like I did, you'd have to get drunk too. Right after that, he's getting suicidal. I mean, it's a shame. At first, what was his solution has become the very thing that's causing his problems. I have known so many, myself included, that have been through this and know this kind of pain, where you want to stop. You're feeling pain. You're drinking to numb the pain while creating more pain. Go figure, right? It is insanity. And my heart goes out to this guy, and I'm anxious to see how this turns out for him. All right, that's all we have for today, my friends. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for joining me in this lifeboat of recovery. I don't speak on behalf of AA or any other sect or organization. I'm just a friend in recovery, grateful that you're here. And if you're sober today, please know that the people who love you are very proud of you. Let's just concentrate on these 24 hours that we've been given. But if we're given another day, I look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow.